Vitalik, thank you for joining us again this year for the Web3 Transition Summit. And last year we had a great conversation about Ethereum culture. So this year I'm so happy to curate a few more, this time just 3 questions. And hopefully that will be an inspiring message again to our fellow builders and investors and the community participants in the ecosystem. All right, shall we jump into it? So first, a lot of discourse has been around Ethereum actually on X or the other app more recently. And there's been a lot of, I guess, dissatisfaction as always, comes and goes. And I love to call upon your thoughts as a kind of social aggregator of Ethereum. And what do you see is the community nodes of Ethereum that brings together agreement where there is disagreement among participants, right? And we know that there are disparate groups, and largely we talk about cypherpunk, regen, and degen. And everybody has their own motivations and interests. But what do you think is one unifying message that you'd like to share with all 3 groups?
So a couple of years ago, Josh Stark wrote this blog post that was called Atoms, Institutions, and Blockchains, right? Basically talking about how blockchains are this way of creating digital hardness. So creating this kind of digital building material that then can be used to create a lot of different kind of digital structures and social structures, but stable and long-lasting structures, right? And this also, I think, speaks to a key difference between things like Bitcoin and Ethereum and things that came before them, right? So, for example, file sharing, torrent networks, mixed nets, Tor, all of this cypherpunk lineage that blockchains originally came from. And the key difference is that those previous things, they do not create persistent structures, right? And so they're useful for, and obviously getting around, other people's structures. They're useful for doing momentary actions, but they're not they're not digital concrete. They're not actually creating persistent structures of our own, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. And the blockchains are, right? And so I view blockchains as being like digital concrete. Well, blockchains and zero knowledge proofs, right? And two-party computation and the whole list of things. And what do you use digital concrete for? You use digital concrete to build digital castles, right? And so I think this to me is what Ethereum is about, right? It's it's about building digital castles, and whether that's digital castles to allow a community to defend itself against an attack, or whether it's digital castles that are part of a digital Disney World that's just there to help people to have fun, or a digital castle that can serve as a digital museum that helps some community maintain continuity, or any combination of these things, right? It's it is the shared infrastructure for building all these different social structures, and I think that ultimately is the commonality that brings together what different parts of the Ethereum space are doing.
That we are sharing this space or sharing this castle that we're collectively building, maybe different parts of it. And so leading on to the next question then, when we think about castles, we think of the old days, and there were lords, there were fiefdoms, there was a lot of inequality. And in fact, that also exists in free market structures and capitalistic structures where when there is a Pareto distribution naturally, because some are more capable or with more resources than others. And we see that emerging in different parts of Ethereum as well, be it parts of the stack or parts of the ecosystem. How do you think we should engage with these, I guess, dominant players or centralizing tendencies in this environment? Should we enshrine? Should we counterbalance? Should we? Is it a philosophical thing? Is it an economic thing? Is it a technology thing that we should act on?
So I think in some cases, having that distribution, including some very large-scale, powerful players, is fine, right? Because the large-scale players get to where they are and stay where they are by providing the service at a higher level of efficiency, right? And I think this can be true for market makers. This can be true even in prediction markets, for example. There's definitely whales that actively participate, and because they're participating with huge amounts of capital, they can afford to put in the time and effort to really make sure they're making the higher quality decisions, right? So there's a lot of contexts in which that kind of thing is healthy. I mean, also like large players even sometimes end up producing or contributing to public goods. There's the places where I think it becomes unhealthy are where it ends up threatening the integrity of the network, right? So if you imagine, like one staking provider getting like 60% of all of the Ethereum stake, or if you imagine like large-scale market activity turning into coordinated market manipulation, or if you imagine like a fund that invests in DAO tokens turning into something that uses like money that its LPs give it in order to vote and be able to just like swing any single decision, right? Like this is where these things become abuses. And I think there definitely is this really valuable entire field of mechanism design in trying as hard as we can to actually correct for those things. And that's something that I think will always inevitably require some outside intervention, right? Like if you think about even something like how the client diversity got improved from like one clients like having like 80%, I mean, both for the consensus and for the execution, to the much better situation we have now. Like that involved a lot of EF people speaking out, that involved a lot of community people speaking out, that involved a lot of one-on-one phone calls made by various people, a lot of offers to help people set up infrastructure, a lot of individual decisions by various different people, right? And like that was a success in coordination, right? Or I mean, you could call it counter coordination, right? Like there is, I mean, the other philosophy for how to achieve decentralization, right, is basically to say, you're trying to be a pet rock, and the pet rock cannot do anything, and so the pet rock is going to be decentralized, right? But the challenge is that, like, if the economic structures create centralizing tendencies, then the thing that maximizes robustness in the long run actually is not the pet rock, right? It actually is something that has enough coordinating capacity and like enough agency to actually counteract the other agency at those times when it actually needs to, right? And I think as an ecosystem, we have seen quite a few successes in doing that, and I think that's definitely a success that's like really worth building on, and that's worth figuring out how to do in places where we haven't succeeded yet.
Do you think that social kind of void dissent is sufficient, or should we actually have some parts of, like, for example, just straight out enshrining them, or straight out like kind of limiting percentage of, I guess, dominance in some ways?
Yeah, I mean, I think if there is something that, like a task that is well defined that would have centralizing tendencies that are too strong by itself, then like turning it into a protocol feature, I think, is absolutely in the cards, right? And I mean, that's something that like we've already been looking into, like, even for proof aggregation. We've been looking into it for I mean, signature aggregation, like specific aspects of, like layer 2 protocols, right? So, like, for example, Justin's ideas around base pre-confirmations. So I think, the possibility of like trying to do things at layer 1, if like it just becomes obvious that like the ecosystem cannot do a particular thing without too many centralizing tendencies, I think is like a possibility that always exists in any ecosystem, and it's something that needs to be used carefully, because if you don't, then you just end up over bloating the entire protocol, right? But and I think it's valuable.
I see. A fine balance to be struck, and of course only possible with the proper coordination, and of course with what we've been writing about recently, plurality, right? Like people coming with different ideas, but hopefully with the same motivations and same conclusions. So I love to, the third question here is plurality as a superpower. I've been thinking about Ethereum and other alt layer ones saying that, oh, we are cheaper, we're faster, we're easier to use. One thing that Ethereum is a clear leader in is this decentralization aspect, and I would say is in plurality. So in your mind, are there certain things that are only possible on Ethereum because of this level of plurality that we have cultivated over the many years?
I mean, I think like Ethereum's excellent stats in client diversity, for example, like that depends on, one, just like the existence of all of these 10 different client teams. As actually at this point, I think people don't appreciate the extent to which they're like actually independent organizations, right? Because I think maybe 3 or 4 years ago, you could say like, oh, most of them, they're basically puppets of the EF. They live on grants, but like they actually have, in like a lot of these cases, they've figured out fully independent funding sources. They've turned into these very separate organizations and even funding a lot of other things on their own. So that's one example. Another example, I think, is just a wide variety of applications that exist in Ethereum, right? Like there is an Ethereum gaming subculture. There is an Ethereum DeFi subculture. There is the Ethereum social subculture. There's all of these different subgroups, Ethereum privacy subgroup. And like all of these subgroups are like big enough to really be their own communities, and like, they're still part of the Ethereum community, right? So that is something that I think is also like only possible again because the Ethereum community has scale, and it actually has diversity to really incorporate all of these different focuses. Also, I mean, other good stats, I mean, geographic decentralization, like if you actually look at the stats, like even for Ethereum, they're quite good and compared to almost any other chain ecosystem. Then if you look at, I mean, just like the ability to just reach users, right? Like you basically have like L2s that'll have their own different approach for what kind of users they're going after. Then you have application developers that'll have their own approach about how to reach users and so on and so forth, right? So like if your ecosystem only has like one or a few focuses, then like it's going to do a bad job at everything else, right? And in Ethereum, I think look, we actually have done a pretty good job across all of those spaces.
And hopefully it leads us to better pathways to adoption towards creating value for the people. If I may wrap up with a quick prediction then, just zooming out, maybe next 1 to 5 years, I know we've written about EAC for AI specifically. I wonder if you could paint maybe an even broader picture, including other suites of technologies. You spoke about quantum recently as well. How do you see then the next 5 years playing out more broadly, including technologically, maybe social, politically, and what are some possible pathways like a doomsday versus an EAC versus like the realistic scenario, and how do we nudge the entire ecosystem community towards the brighter path or the more practical path?
Yeah, so last year I came up with this ideology that I call the DAC, right? Where the D stands for defense and decentralization and democracy. And the core insight here is basically that like if you want a future where the world both does not blow up and does not become totalitarian, then you want to have a world where like defense is the thing that dominates rather than offense, right? Because if offense dominates, then whoever has the most offense just ends up beating everyone else. And like you basically can't have peace without having a really strong hegemon. And the other side is that this technology needs to be like democratically available to people, right? And that's this is like the key difference between like this and like medieval feudalism, for example, right? Like a physical castle, like you need to like own like basically 1,000 slaves in order to have one, right? But a digital castle, so you can download the code and you can go and make a zero knowledge proof by yourself today, right? So, and this is like a frame that applies, I think, both to a lot of what's happening in crypto, but a lot of other technologies as well, right? So I identified 4 categories of defense. I put it into the world of atoms and the world of bits. Within the world of atoms, I talked about like physical defense, which is like what people normally think of as defense. Then which is macro, and then it talks about micro defense, which is basically bio defense, right? And so I think we've lived through COVID. We understand, like roughly what kinds of technologies biodefense means, and I think a lot of people don't see that there is an opportunity for this like very distributed and self-sovereign future of biodefense, where like you actually get this very robust level of protection for people and for communities everywhere in a way that does not at all depend on restrictions on things like freedom of movement, and in a way that can actually be globally accessible. And so you don't have this situation where like everyone's dependent on Pfizer and like a few countries get it ahead and then like Africa has to wait 1.5 years. So, I mean, one specific example, right? So over here, I have a CO2 meter. So the point of CO2 meters is that so the average natural CO2 concentration in the world right now, like in the atmosphere, is a very easy number to remember. It's 420. It used to be 280, but then we screwed up a bit, so now it's 420. But here it's obviously quite a bit higher, right?
Oh, okay.
And when the CO2 concentration is above 420, any excess on top of 420 is basically means that you're breathing in air that other people have breathed out. And so CO2 concentration minus 420 is basically proportional to virus risk, right? And so here, like, this is actually a closed room with a limited number of people, but I see there's like some air filtering happening here, so that actually would be compensating for this and like actually making this more of a disease-safe room than a room with 1600 CO2 otherwise would be, right? And so there's this vision where it can basically figure out the entire pipeline of one is like early detection, right? So have a lot more scanning, like you can scan wastewater, and you can even like do like basically open source intelligence on social media. Like you basically AI scan things that people voluntarily post in public on Twitter, and you can see like where pandemics might be starting like a week before anything else, right? So then you have early detection, then you have testing, and there's a lot of technologies that allow testing to be very easy. Like basically, like we could literally get to the point where testing is more convenient than toothbrushing, and then like hopefully just like add it into your daily schedule. Then you have, also you can test people, you can also test the environment, and this is like a crude way. You might even be in the future, you can test the environment for diseases as well. And then you have, obviously, like vaccines and other kinds of treatments. And so there's like this entire stack of technologies, and there's like technologies that are always on, and then there's technologies that are more inconvenient that you can activate only if there's an actual emergency. And if we stack these things together, then like it seems very plausible that the R0 of like even the worst versions of COVID or Omicron would actually go below 1. And so like you could make humanity like basically default pandemic safe, right? So, and then again, this is all no like stay at home mandates, no restrictions on hopping countries every 24 hours, like no nothing, right? And like people don't realize like the extent to which this is possible, right? So that's biodefense. Then that's the world of atoms. In the world of bits, you have so I've made this split between what I call info defense and cyber defense. So this is a distinction that's unique to myself, but I think it's like a valuable distinction, right? Basically, the dividing line is info defense is defense where reasonable people can disagree about who the attacker is, and cyber defense is where like everyone agrees, like that's the happen, right? So like when you talk about some like say preventing scams or misinformation, for example, right? Like sometimes it's like, well, one man's scam is actually another man's like product that's like actually better than like 10x better than all of the like old mainstream corrupt corporations, right? Or like one man's misinformation is the other man's like, well, actually they have a good point, right? And so what you want you want solutions that both like help actually like identify and like help people not be caught in by these actual threats, but also in a way that solves the political problem, right? In a way that like actually avoid enshrining one group of experts to basically like decide all this stuff on behalf of the entire world, right? And like community notes, right, is like a really good advantage of that example of that, right? And like I think the reason why people love community notes is because one, like it does work, and two, it's just so clearly like actually open and democratic, right? Like people see examples of community notes making the American left look like complete idiots. People see examples of community notes making the American right look like complete idiots. People see instances of community notes making the enemies of America look like complete idiots. So, you cover the whole triangle. People see instances of, and like you have to give mad props to Elon for allowing this, right? You have community notes that go on advertisements. Like people advertise on Twitter, they give Elon money, and then Elon still lets like the community note come in and basically say like, hey, this thing that the ad says you can buy for $27, like actually it's a drop shipping thing and you can buy it over here on AliExpress for $480, right? So that's like it's clearly a thing that just that like it's willing to go after falsehood wherever it sees it, and people can smell that, right? And like that's like one of those good examples. I think it's very far from a perfect solution, right? And like one of the weaknesses is that it's often too slow, especially once tweets become very viral, right? But it's something that is like I want to see 10 more things in that same category, right? So that to me is that info defense. And there's like lots of other examples. Like one thing that I want to see is LLMs that can locally run on your phone and that can automatically scan through your messages and your calls and basically tell you like, hey, is this call that you're getting right now actually a scammer, right? Because like scams are, they're actually a big deal. I mean, even here in Singapore, right? Yeah. So, but then like you're gonna get like people who are getting like a type of scam that like hundreds of people have already received before, right? And so like if you can get AI to just like actually detect that and warn people, and at the same time personalized and localized, and also give people a choice of which AI that they're getting, then like that's something that I think can really solve a lot of problems for people, right? So that's InfoDiac. And within the crypto space, I think there's InfoDiac as well, right? Because like you have wallets that really have this need to protect people against scams. And then cyber defense is like defending against hacks. So like formal verification is a really big and powerful thing, right? I think we want to get to the point where we have trustable applications on trustable smart contracts on trustable chains. It's running in trustable browsers, in trustable operating systems. That's all running on trustable, secure hardware, right? And like the entire chain, where you have a chain of trust, where you can actually get like it's secure because of openness and verification, and not just secure because of trust me, right? And I think modern advancements in zero knowledge proofs, blockchains, formal verification, like that whole combination of things, are going to enable a lot of possibilities that just did not exist before, right? So yeah, and then those are like the four key planks of DIAC. And then I think another really valuable thing to develop at the same time is like better decentralized governance technology and better decentralized like public conversation technology. So if you have those things, then like you basically have a vision of a world which can remain like open and free, and like also protected against like threats that people want to be safe from at the same time.
Oh, there's so many there. We could run like a hackathon, a DM hackathon for all of these ideas.
So there will be a DIAC day at DEF CON. So if you're coming to that, stop by.
Of course, yeah, we'll definitely be there.